Welcome to Criminal Record, the Daily Record's new weekly crime show. My name is Norman Silvester and I'm the Daily Record's crime reporter. Our special guest today is David Swindle, former detective with Strathclyde Police. David was a police officer for more than 30 years. He joined the force in 1977 and left in 2011 at the rank of Detective Superintendent. He investigated more than 100 murders and was the man who brought serial killer Peter Tobin to justice. He also initiated the UK-wide police investigation Operation Anagram, which identified Tobin as responsible for 2 other murders, the murders of missing women Vicky Hamilton and Dinah Nicol. David, welcome to Criminal Record.
Yes, nice to be here, and I'm honoured to be here, Norman, and great to see you, because you're someone that has been in my life when I was a detective, when I was a very young detective. Norman Silvester, the crime reporter, yes.
Thank you, David. Tell us about Operation Anagram and the investigation into the murder of Angelika Kluk by Peter Tobin. You have said that you've said in the past that you believe him responsible for the murders of other women. With new developments in forensic science, is it time to take a fresh look?
Well, to put it into a nutshell very quickly, because this went on for years, Operation Anagram, but it was the murder of a young Polish woman, Angelika Kluk, in a church in Glasgow. And it was absolutely horrendous what Tobin did. And he was in that church using a false name, Patrick McLaughlin. And as a result of what he'd done to her and the ferocity of it and how organised he was, I thought, he's killed before. So I set up Operation Anagram to look at his life. And that's what he did. Looked at his whole life, where he was, from he was born right through. And as a result of that, we identified that Tobin had killed 2 other women. Vicky Hamilton, who went missing in Bathgate, and Dinah Nicol, who went missing near Guildford in England. And sadly, as a result of and this is team working, Norman. This is not about me. I was in charge of it. But there was a team involved in that, forensics, proper detective work looking at that. And sadly, we found the bodies of 2 young women, Vicky Hamilton, who he'd killed in Bathgate, and Dinah Nicol, who had abducted in Guildford and killed in his house there in Irvine Drive in Margate. These bodies were buried in his garden. Absolutely horrendous.
The 3 murders all had similarities insofar as he disposed and buried the bodies. There were chance encounters. We know with Vicky Hamilton, she was waiting at a bus stop. Dinah Nicol hitching a lift home from a concert. We know of other women that have gone missing over the years. Can you talk in general terms about Anagram and, can you talk about how many possible victims? You maybe can't talk about names, but how many victims are maybe out there?
Well, that's the issue with Tobin. Tobin targeted people that were vulnerable at that time. And it's the same as Fred and Rosemary West. It's the same as Dennis Nielsen. They targeted people that are vulnerable at that time. People they know that may not be reported missing. And that's what Tobin did. Angelika Kluk, she was a vulnerable person in a country, in a city, bettering her education, a job at the church. She was vulnerable. And he is a charming individual. That sounds terrible, talking about a serial killer. And what I say about serial killers is they're cunning, they're controlling, they're charming, they're conniving, and they can be clever. And they can be clever. And that is the thing with Tobin. He targeted these women because he hung around, when he looked at his life, he hung around religious establishments, churches, homeless persons units. He's going to see people and meet people that are vulnerable. Now, if Tobin has killed other people, which I have no doubt he has, he targets people that may never be reported missing. So how do we know they're missing? That is the thing. And he buries them, he conceals them. He's forensically aware because he left Angelika Kluk's body under the church and he stayed there for 2 days before the heat was on. And he buried poor Dinah and Vicky in his garden in Kent. So Tobin has killed other people. How many we don't know. And there was speculation. There's been a lot of speculation. And there was an article in a newspaper that said he told a psychiatrist or a shrink, the media said, that he'd killed 48 people. Tobin never said that. Tobin never said that. We don't know how many people Tobin killed. It could be 48, it could be 480. That's the sad realities. He's a person that is total denial of the ones he's convicted of, and he's never admitted killing other people. I've no doubt he's killed other people. And people ask me, are you proud of what you did setting up Operation Anagram? Yes, I am. But I am sad that we never found other victims that he's killed.
He is, in many ways, a classic psychopath. He's not somebody with horns coming out of his head. He would be quite plausible to people that meet him, the people work with him.
Exactly. What does a killer look like? And that comes out quite a lot. I did a big tour in the UK, and I'm about to do another one, Murder: A Search for the Truth in Scotland. And one of the questions that people ask is, what does a killer look like? They don't. They don't have a stamp on their head that says, I'm a killer. And this is why these serial killer types can ingratiate themselves into normal life, and they can live a normal life and continue to kill. That is what happened. And Tobin, he didn't. But it's interesting. Once he's identified as a killer, everyone says, I always knew there was something about him. This was someone. He didn't jump. It wasn't sort of stranger rapes, stranger murders. There was always an element of grooming, chatting to people, engaging people in conversations. Because no matter what, he killed these people. People say, I always knew there was something. But when you look back, people describe him as a chatty individual. And there's pictures of him with a suit and tie on. He was someone that was so-called Mr. Nice Guy. And that sounds terrible. He's a murderer, a serial killer, a horrible, cowardly killer.
We know, we suspect that Peter Tobin may be responsible for many other murders of young, vulnerable women. And you mentioned there about, various figures. Peter Tobin may be admitting or confessing, but he never did that. He never spoke about the murders, did he?
He doesn't confess to anything. He was interviewed at length numerous times with our Anagram team, using psychologists, expert psychologists to look at him, profiling, interview advisors. He denies everything. He's insisted that he was fitted up, but he didn't do it. No, Tobin has never admitted to anything, and he never did.
He never will. I believe he may even have been interviewed close to his death in 2022. He just wouldn't. There would be no sense of him admitting anything. He's in complete denial.
That's the thing. It's like Ian Brady, the Moors murderer. It's the ultimate control. Narcissistic, controlling individuals. They have that power to hold it there right to the bitter end. And there's been lots of speculation of what Tobin could have done. There's lots of speculation what Sutcliffe could have done, and Fred and Rosemary West. People become, a figure. People know who they are. And sometimes they glamorise them. And it's good. I know I'm sitting here with the newspaper, the biggest newspaper in Scotland. But it makes a good story. And people do speculate. But the real thing is, it's unfair for families to be led to believe by professionals like I was, and I still am. I'm a crime expert. I'm still using my skills. For them to believe, or to be led to believe, that the loved one was killed by someone like Tobin when there's no evidence.
Well, just finally on the issue of Operation Anagram, during the police investigation to Angelika Kluk, Dinah, Nicol and Vicky Hamilton, officers recovered large amounts of jewellery and small personal effects, which we believe could have been trophies or
yeah.
We'll ever get to the bottom of that.
Yeah, when Tobin left the church at the St Patrick's Church in Glasgow, he left behind some personal items, and that was women's jewellery. And we traced other items of women's jewellery that he had to this person. And that is women's jewellery. Why? You've got to ask the question, why does a serial killer have women's jewellery? And the phrase trophies, yeah, that's the phrase that's used a lot. And the phrase I always say is, I don't like the word trophies. It sounds like a victory. Right. It's a souvenir from a horrible act. And Tobin has that jewellery. And there's DNA, women's DNA, different women's DNA on that jewellery, which we've never identified. And there's always the hope that perhaps someday they'll identify that. And the scientist that was key involved in all is Carol Rogers. Carol Rogers, the forensic scientist that lay under the floor with Tobin, with the Angelika Kluk, and took forensic samples that were vital in convicting him. And she worked an anagram right through, and she has the profiles and knows what the profiles are, and they always live in hope. Perhaps someday there will be a body, human remains, or a body part identified that links into the DNA we've got. but you need to have something to compare to. Technology changes, things change over the years. Policing has changed drastically over the years, and I think when I joined in 1977, the police, how it's changed right through.
But the technology changes all the time, particularly in regard to getting DNA matches. So there's still that potential in the future, though Tobin passed away 3 years ago, that we could still link him into other murders if there's a recovery of a body or a person.
Yes, I mean, that technology, I could never envisaged what it would turn out like. You know, when I joined the police in 77, we didn't have, it was blood groups and different things like that, and fingerprints, heavy reliance on that at the time. You still have that, but then it progresses to DNA, and then you can get ethnicity, you know, where they're from, the person DNA, and that will continue to change, it will continue to improve. I don't know where we'll be in 10 years' time. And that's the big thing that comes up all the time, artificial intelligence. Could artificial intelligence replace the role of the detective? Thankfully not. Hopefully not. But we could make better use of artificial intelligence as the police using it more. But artificial intelligence doesn't have empathy, it doesn't have a professional judgment. So things will change and they'll continue to change. For the better.
But you still need the old-fashioned boots on the ground.
You always need people that have got intuition, people that have got experience, professional judgment. You always need that. And, you know, it's a personal thing. For me as a detective, dealing with a murder, dealing with the victims, it's a personal thing and it's a professional thing. Whereas with artificial intelligence, you have to be careful.
Okay. Tobin has also been mentioned as a suspect in the Bible John murders, the murders of 3 young women in the late 1960s in Glasgow. Having refused the Bible John case as part of Operation Anagram, these were the murders of 3 women, Patricia Docker, Jemima MacDonald and Helen Puttock. Having reviewed these as part of Anagram, what's your view on Tobin's possible involvement as a suspect? You've said in the past the murders of these 3 women could be the work of a different man, and that Tobin elsewhere was elsewhere. Yeah. Could you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, I actually was involved in reviewing these murders twice. Mm-hmm. So when I was the Detective Chief Inspector, the DCI in Glasgow City Centre, there was a review conducted then looking at the 3 murders. And I wasn't convinced that the same person was involved in all 3 murders. Then when we're looking at Peter Tobin and his life and some of the unhelpful speculation that surrounded that Tobin was Bible John, Tobin's not Bible John. There's no evidence to say that Peter Tobin is the person that killed these 3 people. In fact, the label that's attached to that, Bible John, I'm not convinced the same person killed all 3 people.
We know that Tobin, I think you did the analysis, that there was 3 murders, one in February 1968, another one in October 69, August 69, and then Helen Puttock in October 69. But Tobin was elsewhere at the time of the second 2 murders. He was down in Brighton, wasn't he?
Tobin, before one of it, he was in Brighton the day before one of the other ones, and there was DNA, there was some DNA examined, and it was at Tobin's.
Okay, and we know that he was on honeymoon at the time. He would, for the 3rd murder, he would probably have had to have sneaked away from the house in Brighton, gone up to Glasgow and come back down. It's unlikely, isn't it?
There's no evidence it's Tobin. That's the thing. And it makes good reading. Mm-hmm. People buy books. Mm-hmm. You know, there's books written about Tobin being the so-called Bible John. There's other theories. And, you know, that's the sad realities. And that's what the challenges of being a detective, working in these high-profile cases, is the speculation. I mean, it's changed a lot nowadays. It's social media we have now.
But you analysed both the evidence and the forensic evidence. We have a DNA sample from the 3rd victim that was extracted in the 1990s. There's no match with Tobin, and we also know that Tobin was elsewhere.
There's no evidence it's Tobin. There's no evidence it's Tobin.
You're happy to nail that.
Yeah, there's no evidence.
It's a myth, isn't it?
Professional judgment and experience, because I was the police. I was the senior officer in Glasgow City Centre, the DCI, when we reviewed it then, way back in 2002, and then again in Operation Anagram. So the police have the benefits of seeing documentation, reviewing it, whereas there's people that are speculating are not in the police.
Are they not seeing the evidence?
They're not in the police. Yeah, exactly. And that's sadly the thing that happens now, Norman, is that there's a lot of this, very unhelpful for live ongoing investigations. We saw it with the Nicol case, the woman that drowned in England, and you saw it with that. I call them the keyboard warriors, the armchair detectives. It's very unhelpful. And that is a difficulty that I didn't have when it was, you had media intrusion. You were one of them years ago in the media. It's different now. It's social media. Things are moving fast. There's a thirst. We saw it in Southport as well. There's a thirst for information. And it's very difficult for the detectives in charge and the families to cope with what's going out there, the social media. I'm a big fan of social media. I'm all over social media with the work I do now with people that are killed abroad.
It turns everybody into a detective, isn't it?
Yes, rightly so. People want... There's a thirst for information nowadays, understandably so. But I need to double-check things now when I read it, because you hear this word, you hear it, big public figures in the world, fake news. Yeah, yes, there is, but you need to check it all. And for you as a journalist, it's really difficult now. Social media is the way people are looking at all the time. So it's very difficult. Things change so fast.
Do you think the Bible John murders, the murders of 3 women in the late 1960s, could ever be solved? Last week we featured a book by Australian author Jill Barvin-Mitzi, who has named a potential suspect as a former printer, John Templeton, who passed away in 2015, who had a genealogical link to another suspect from the 1960s, 1996, John Irvin McInnes. Your thoughts about this as a potential suspect, John Templeton? Should the police be taking a look at this, or is it time to close the book on that type of speculation?
Police Scotland have a cold case unit, and they are good at what they do. It's not just the police, it's the police out at Gartcosh. They've got people from the Crown Office Prosecution Service, they've got forensic experts, they've got all sorts of profilers. So they look at all, and they've had some big successes in Scotland. Rainey McRae, they've had Brenda Page, the Aberdeen, the doctor there. They've had lots of real big successes. And the so-called Bible John murders, the 3 murders of these women in Glasgow, the sad murders of the unsolved murders of these women, the cold case unit, if there's new information come in, they look at it. They look at it. And I'm conscious of the fact there's been a lot of... There's that book you mentioned. In fact, you interviewed me about that book for a news article. And there was another podcast by William Gillen about the so-called Bible John murders. A lot of information comes out in these things, but it's back to what I say. The police are the police, and they have access to legitimate ways to investigate crime. But I always say, it's a phrase I had in Anagram, and I use it now with the work I'm doing in people that are killed abroad like Craig Mallon and Kirsty Maxwell. The passage of time should not be detrimental to the detection of crime. It shouldn't matter how long it takes to solve a crime. The truth will come out, because people fall out over years, allegiances change, and new information comes in. Technology changes. DNA reviewing cases. There was one in Bristol recently, 1967. It was a woman, an elderly woman was murdered, and the guy was just convicted.
Oh, for my DNA.
Yes. So it's that's the thing you always think about in the cases like the Bible John, so-called Bible John murder, Alexander Blue, 2002, unsolved, and I always hope that someday the truth will come out, because it will.
Coming back to Bible John, we have this book about a suspect being identified. The police are aware of the book. Should they be looking at this, or will the police will know what they know, don't they? I mean,
the police will be aware of that, and they will look at anything like that. That's what they do. That's cold case, because what they want, they're very professional what they do, particularly that gash out. Every police force in the UK has a cold case commitment. In Scotland, you've got the benefits of one police force, you've got the benefits of the Crown Office directing things, and there's been a lot of big successes. In all these cases, the likes of the 1960s murders of the 3 women, they're part of that. They'll review these, they'll look at them. And it is a system we have. And that's what I find about the UK. We don't have it in Spain, because I'm dealing with a murder in Spain. Craig Mallon, a Scottish man, murdered in Lorette de Mar. They don't have a system, formalised reviews like they do in the UK. But yeah, if there's evidence, the police will deal with it, and they will look at these things, the likes of that book. They'll have that information.
Do you think they should be going to Jill Barvin-Mitzi and saying, tell us what you've got? or you think they'll know, they'll be aware of what she has?
There's been a lot of media reporting on it,
It'll be up to
a lot
them.
of speculation, and you would put in an if asked, I'm quite sure, and the cold case unit professional, they look at whatever there is there, whatever opportunities there are. So, that's what they want to do. That's their job. They're looking at old cases, and if there's evidence there, the police will find it.
So you would say that they are aware of it, and if they think it connects into what they already know, they can develop it. They'll look at
Yeah, of course. Anything that's there, opportunities. Because although I'm not in the police, you said I left the police in 2011. Thanks for saying left. I actually retired, but I hate that word retired because I'm still doing stuff and I appear on TV. I'm a crime expert now with things, and quite a lot of times I get people emailing me direct with new information, and I send it to the Police Scotland Cold Case Unit, and they look into it. They investigate it. We have to trust the police to investigate crimes.
One final point on the Bible John murders. Obviously, it's more than 55 years ago. Passage. Do you think there'll ever be? Could there be a resolution to that?
Well, I've said that. You always hope with the changes in technology and things like that. You always hope, but you can go back as far as the Victorian times to the so-called Jack the Ripper in London. I was in the Whitechapel murders. There's so much speculation with that, and unsolved murders feed that. There's not so many unsolved murders now because of technology. You can't do anything in the UK without being caught. You'll get caught. So
the Bible John fight could still be solved. We never give up, and it would be in the public interest to do so. We know there's still surviving relatives of the 3 victims, and I would imagine that the case, you did 2 reviews of it. When you did the review, I remember you said you didn't really see any particular pointers, without giving too much away, that pointed at one individual.
The pointers are that it might not be the same person that's killed these 3 women.